Hello, and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at the Algebra 1 concept of functions, specifically how we can identify them with presented a variety of forms, and we'll do it in 5 minutes or less. So first, let's zero in on that term function. What is a function? That's a good working definition. Well, there's a few different ways you could define it depending on how technical you want to be. I like something a little bit more simplistic. I'll say each input leads to exactly one output. Now, what do we mean by input and output? Okay, so when we're thinking of inputs, we should be thinking of independent variables. And so most of the time, those are going to be your x's, right? So we could just think each x leads to one output. This is typically your dependent variable. Now this can change a little bit based on the problem set that you're working with. Sometimes it's the y, sometimes it's the f of x, g of x, h of x, anything like that. But basically each x leads to one y. And when that's true, you have a function. So let's look over here on the left. Okay, so we're going to kind of just examine the set we have on the left. So what we have is we've got 5 different points, and they're all plotted, and I just drew a line kind of connecting them. So if you ever get a graph is really easy to verify because you could do something called a vertical line test. What you're going to do is you're going to test each x, right? So I'm going to test my -7, draw a vertical line. And as long as that vertical line only touches the graph once, then that part of the graph is fine. You're going to draw these vertical lines, and you're going to see, is there any point in which I draw a vertical line, a basic x value, and I hit the graph twice? Because if my vertical line hits the graph twice, it's not a function, because each x doesn't lead to a different y. I might have an x that leads to 2 different y's if I hit the graph twice on a vertical line. But this does pass the vertical line test. You can also just take a look if you're given a set of ordered pairs. Maybe you don't have a visual graph to look at. Look at that set of ordered pairs. Do you see any repeats? I've got a 6, I've got a 3, I've got a -4, -3, 2. I don't see any repeats. So let me show you a different way we can look at it here. Sometimes you might see a mapping. So I'm going to put these in order. I got -4, -3, 2, 3, and 6. Okay, so those are going to be my inputs. I'm going to put my outputs over here. I'm going to put these in order. Now I've got a -1. Look, I've got a 0 twice. We'll talk about whether or not that makes a difference. A 2 and a 4, right? So my -4 goes to -1. My -3 goes to 0. My 2 goes to 4. My 3 goes to 2. They cross. Doesn't matter. My 6 also goes to 0, right? So it goes right up there. So here's the question. Do I have an input, right? Do I have an x value that goes to 2 different y values? No, I don't. So that means it's still a function. Now, do I have 2 different inputs that land on the same output? Yeah, I've got my -3, and I've got my 6. They both land right there on that 0, and that's fine, as long as I don't have 2 different inputs, or one input, like -3 repeated twice, that lands to two different outputs. So either way you look at it, this is a function on the left. Now let's look and see what's happening over here on the right. Well, first off, it's not it is a continuous line, but it's got bounds, right? It's going to be greater, the domain is going to be greater than -2, and that's like a 5.5, less than 5.5. Take a look at my vertical line test. Okay, it's not passing right around here. Okay, so it is not a function because it has one input, right? That's a 4, and it leads to 2 different outputs, right? It leads to a 0 and it leads to a -2. Also, just take a look right here. The second you see an x value showing up twice and leading to 2 different outputs or 2 different y values, that also is your visual cue. This is not a function because each input needs to lead to only one output.